everyone, Ben here, and welcome to an election prediction. I'm going to go to a blank map to talk about this one, and we're going to start by covering, let's just choose a Democrat. Someone mentioned Cuomo as a decent candidate, and we're talking about Governor Cuomo from New York, and they're not wrong, but also I think, at least in the eyes of the Democrats, he may have a little bit too much of that corporate stink that I think Hillary Clinton probably had a little too much of, at least for Democrat voters. And I won't say he's corrupt, but because I don't know enough about any of his business ties or anything like that. He also has been known to at least attempt to make deals with non-New York's, with Republicans in the state of New York. So he may be able to leverage that to try and appeal to moderates, but I just kind of see him as a little bit of a flat character. From what I've looked at, I just don't really see it. I don't even see him as likely to run. Also, his name recognition isn't that great nationwide. Of course, primary would definitely change that, and obviously he's from New York, so that'll help a good bit. At least in terms of being able to promote himself. Obviously, he would get the West Coast, minus Alaska. You get Hawaii, you get Illinois. He would definitely get New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and the district. We'll talk about, he'd definitely get the Portland, but he'd definitely get Portland, Maine, but I don't think he'd be able to change that rural vote in Maine. And we'll talk about the at-large vote. States that for sure would go Republican, and it wouldn't even be a question as to how competitive they would be. I'm not even going to bother with that suburban district in Nebraska. It's a conservative suburb in a conservative state, and that's kind of what I noticed. I don't think Texas would be as competitive as it was in 2016. I think part of that was Hillary Clinton having some form of Southern credibility, which I think is weird considering she's from Illinois and representing New York in the Senate. The only Southern tie she has is she was the First Lady of Arkansas, and she's basically a carpetbagger. Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, and Missouri. I'll also give Cuomo New Mexico without any further thought. So, of course, we've got these states, it's roughly equal. 185 votes up for grabs in 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 states that I would say should be considered reasonably competitive. Let's go ahead and start taking states off the board. We're going to start in Arizona and say that's probably going to go to Trump. I think it'd be just one cycle too soon in 2020, especially with an incumbent Republican, unless there was something really weird going on, like a massive market collapse or an extremely, extremely, extremely charismatic Democrat and Trump being about half as popular as he is now. And even then, actually, no, that all makes sense. But one of those factors I don't think would be enough, except maybe the market collapse, because that actually matters. And Trump is pretty charismatic as well. Georgia, mostly the same thing, except slightly more Republican leaning, enough to say probably wouldn't get within 5%. And that's because Georgia, like a lot of southern states, has a very inelastic voting population. And this is actually why I don't think Democrat Stacey Abrams in Georgia can win the gubernatorial election there without a lot of help, is just because Georgia has a very inelastic voting population. There's not a lot of swing voters in the state, and Democrats tend to perform extremely poorly amongst white voters in all southern states, but especially in places like Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana, Tennessee, unless they're local, somewhat conservative Democrats, and even then they have issues. We have to remember the last Democrat to win a statewide office in Georgia was Zell Miller in 2000. That was almost 20 years ago. And Zell Miller isn't exactly what most people would consider a Democrat. He's kind of like a Joe Manchin or a Joe Donnelly. Anyway, so I'm also going to take North Carolina off. I don't think Cuomo would be able to turn out enough North Carolina Democrats enough to win the election. Barack Obama was only able to do it once, and he had the help of a market collapse. So now we're going into more swing states. He'd probably win Virginia. He'd be seen as moderate enough to at least win Nova and probably the Tidewater area. Southwest Virginia still would hate it, and I can honestly see there being reasonable suspicions for Southwest Virginia to split off. Though I don't think that's going to happen. Most people in the state of Virginia like being part of Old Dominion, but I think there's going to become a point where a lot of people out in this area of the state are going to say, enough is enough, we're tired of being controlled by Nova. That's Northern Virginia, but Colorado, I can see Cuomo carrying that by about 4 to 5%. Nevada, probably similar margin to 2016, maybe flipping to Trump, but I'm a little skeptical of that. The whole region, the whole Sun Belt is starting to shift towards the Democrats, and that includes Texas. But it's also moving pretty slowly. But states have already started to flip. I can see them continuing to move. So I can see Nevada going to Cuomo. I really don't think Cuomo would have that Rust Belt credibility or appeal in states like Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Iowa, Minnesota, really this just Rust Belt Upper Midwest area. I think Ohio would go for Trump just because he's the incumbent, and he won it by a decent margin. I think he'd probably lose a few percent, but not enough to bring it under 5. Iowa, similar thing. I think he'd probably... I'll come back to the rest of these states. New Hampshire, I'm going to give to Cuomo. And I think to be on the safe side, I'm going to also give the statewide vote in Maine to Cuomo. I'm going to also give Florida to Trump just because he is the incumbent, and Florida tends to vote for the incumbent, and then flip to the other party after 2 terms, because and this is actually, I'm not sure how far back in the past you can extend this trend, but it's definitely a trend in Florida. They vote, well, they'll vote for a party twice, and then they'll flip, and then they'll flip, and then they'll flip, after 2 cycles every single time. So let's go up here. I think it's just a year, it's 1 cycle too soon for Minnesota, except outside of a few candidates. Even though my trends indicate it should go in 2020, that's assuming a 50-50 election. I think it's maybe a bit too soon, outside of a few specific matchups. Michigan, I think 2016 was maybe too soon for it to flip, especially given Trump's weirdness being at least a very popular candidate in the Rust Belt, but also being deeply unpopular for, well, obvious reasons. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Pennsylvania, I think 2016 was a bit of a shock for it, but 2020 would have been the year I expected it to go Republican for the first time. And I can see that trend holding at the presidential level and maybe expanding a little bit, but not by a significant amount. Wisconsin, I'm going to say that it would stay with the president. It's a little bit more conservative than Pennsylvania. It's a little bit more rural in Pennsylvania. And it's also seems to have gone a little bit more to the Republicans at all levels than Pennsylvania has, which Pennsylvania is definitely that true swing state. Wisconsin is kind of evolving into a Republican-leaning swing state, kind of like Virginia has shifted from the Republicans to the Democrats. So this is what I think a Cuomo-Trump election would look like. It'd be reasonably close to this. Again, any state in the lighter color, any state could shift in a way that I don't expect. Any state in the lighter colors could go the other way. So there's about 145 votes that could shift completely. And any state in the darker colors, essentially Iowa, Ohio, Georgia, those states could also become a lot more competitive if certain unforeseen events take place. It really just depends. Anyway, I'm going to thank y'all for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. Enjoy your day.